This is the 25th of February. Media Center Ukraine is working. My name is Svetlana Cheporenko, and now we'll have the presentation of the report After Illegal Imprisonment From Survival to Recovery. We'll be talking about the topic that the civilians who are coming back to Ukraine from the captivity by the enemy, from the illegal imprisonment by Kremlin's authorities, their way is only beginning here in Ukraine. We'll be talking about the recovery, about how the state is working on reintegration, their reintegration into the society, and helping them, on providing them comprehensive work, which gaps exist in this system, and what's important to do just now so that this process would be well ordered and specific and very understandable. The most important thing, efficient. Let me introduce the participants. Ihor Kotelianets, head of the NGO Association of Relatives of Political Prisoners of the Kremlin. Tetiana Maletska, clinical psychologist at the Mental Health and Rehabilitation Center Lisova, Polyana. Yuriy Shapovalov, released from illegal imprisonment, representative of the NGO December 29th, and will be joined online by Azat Azatyan, founder of the Rehabilitation Center in Zaporizhzhia, former political prisoner. Ihor, you and your colleagues have analyzed the acting legislation and how it is taking care about the released POWs and civilians. What are your conclusions? How do you see this system should be reconstructed, rebuilt, and what needs to be changed instantly or implemented in rehabilitation of the released civilians? Thank you so much for these questions. Good day, dear participants, both offline and many of us online with us. And I would like to say that you'll also have the opportunity to pose a question, because the question of how the rehabilitation program should look like is a huge one. It should have a separate 3-hour round table, but I have only 10 to 15 minutes, so I'll try to really quickly mention some of the basic things and to delve deeper with the questions from the participants. Our organization, Association of Relatives of Political Prisoners of the Kremlin, shaping the understanding what the framework program of rehabilitation for released persons in our state should look like, has conducted a research. And having done that, it focused on 2 dimensions. This research is at the crossover of these 2 dimensions. That is, the implementation of the legal obligations of our state and certain international documents which Ukraine has signed and which provide us the whole route and which should be in the national legislation, so that the people captured after the comeback could get the necessary help which they need. And of course, that is studying the needs of the people affected, because theoretically documents may have different things, but we need to look at the people. We need to understand them, what they would need after they come back. So it's important to mention that in this research we focused upon and took as a basis, we developed and considered the issue of rehabilitation and reintegration not as a part, not as some additional encouragement or some discount, but some part of the system to provide efficient means of legal protection of people as the basis for everybody who is released, which doesn't need, you don't need to deserve for, or you don't need to do something special for that. So I will go along the presentation. Altogether, starting this issue, we've conducted the survey and semi-structured interviews, expert round tables, discussions. So in this or that way, these events were involving 43 NGOs, about 50 participants, among whom there are lots of people who were released. And what's also important, we've analyzed about 550 statements to the service of legal assistance of our organization when people came to us with the specific issues. So we made conclusions and looked what people were facing, what were the issues, what were the root causes of these issues, and what needs to be done to solve them. So, of course, we took into consideration the available mechanisms at the national level, and as of today, we have both the main and the most important law, number 2010, about the identification of the fact about the people who were illegally imprisoned, and this law gives the guarantee that the people who are coming back have the right for the free rehabilitation assistance. We were looking into what the bylaws are, and we have the resolution 296. We need to say that it has been developed first mostly focused on the military. It was working, it accomplished its task, but what we heard during the survey, we heard some of the good feedback from the military, but our research was about civilians. So the civilians were either not aware about this resolution or couldn't use it. And also we took into account the new resolution, which appeared just a couple of months ago. It started its action since the 1st of January 1775 about the first measures to help people after their comeback. The Ombudsman's office was the main force thanks to which this resolution has been adopted. It provides the primary measures and 50,000 hryvnia for the people after their comeback for rehabilitation measures. And we have also taken it into account. If we say what's wrong, because seems we have the law and bylaws, but if we, I'd say, translate it into the language of metaphors, there are certain fragments of the attempts of our state to protect and provide the necessary support for the people. However, those are the fragments of the puzzle scattered all over the corners, which are not compatible in one system. This system is really separate. So what's wrong with the resolution 296, which I mentioned above, and which is acting since March 2024? Well, it's mostly, I would say, created to provide guarantees for the people affected by illegal imprisonment. It is mostly describing the authorities of the state power authorities, what they can do for these people or may not do. If these people would know about these authorities properly, they would go there, they would claim, they would require, they would have certain legal substantiation and some expertise to use all of that. But the main issue is that the assistance which is foreseen by this resolution is provided only to the released civilians who went through the procedure of the identification or detection, the status, that is the fact of illegal imprisonment. They went through the commission. I'd like to remind you that the vast majority of the people who are incommunicado cannot get through this procedure and cannot identify the fact according to the procedure how it is described now. And even those who can do that, well, it could take months, and we have lots of cases when it takes 6 to 8 months. And of course, you cannot even speak about any primary rehabilitation assistance because people are just busy. They are obliged to prove, to convince the state that they have the right for that. If we mention resolution which appeared just recently, 1775, the state definitely should mention the efforts of the Ombudsman's office, because they said a lot that it's necessary to have a separate, simplified track for the people after the comeback, so that the person instantly after the comeback could use the state assistance, rehabilitation measures without the necessity to prove anything. And however it was possible, the Ombudsman's office was trying to solve this issue, promoting this resolution, and the state, of course, chose the easier way for itself, because the resolution guarantees certain rehabilitation measures. However, they are also guaranteed by the law 2010, which I mentioned above. Nobody knows what those rehabilitation measures mean. There is no special program which would be focused for the needs of the people affected, of the people who lived through torture. So according to the documented I'd say, cases. We know that about 90% of people are getting through torture, as it is seen in the law, by legal imprisonment, and the state is choosing the simpler way, just to pay 50,000 hryvnia for every single one of them, and let people spend this money for their rehabilitation. But we don't know where they take this sum of money from, and we understand that it would never cover the needs. So the state is not offering the route. It's not offering the comprehensive approach. Obviously, we went to the affected people, to the victims, and we were working with them. And what we heard, the people themselves who were released, both thanks to exchanges, and many of them released their own after incommunicado detainment, they told that first and foremost, instantly after the comeback, it is necessary for them to have the maintenance and the support of the case manager. They need a person who would help them understand which country they came to and what rules and laws exist, how they can be used, how the phone is working, how the hotline, the family doctor, the DIA app are working. So this is one of the first requests, because the people staying there are just falling out of the reality which we get used to in the real life. People would like to have a roadmap. They want to understand that it's not just now when they were taken and put into the hospital for 3 days, living in the anxiety that they would be driven away in 3 days and they wouldn't know where to go. They would like to have the roadmap and the understanding that they would know what to do for a year or 2 years, a certain route which takes into consideration their needs, and they would understand what and when they would get any help. So then the needs are divided into 4 spheres. Then, when the person is already taken out of the urgent state, went through the diagnostics, understood where he or she is, adapted a bit, then there is the need in legal services, so that you could collect the evidence that the person has stayed in the illegal imprisonment, and to get a so-called status, and I would say the proof through the commission documenting of all of the violations which were in fact inflicted onto this person. So here, obviously, we have certain obstacles. It is hard for the people. People say about that constantly in every new office they need to tell about their story, which leads to re-traumatization. They see that there is no feedback from the people they communicate with. They don't understand what these people had to live through. So the people are just closing into themselves. They begin to blame themselves that it's their issue. And they just decide not to communicate with any public authorities. Those are social needs, obviously, like accommodation, documents, profits, what and when these persons would get revenues and profits, and psychosocial support. That is the help of the psychologist at least. We are speaking about provision of urgent psychological help instantly after the release, and psychological support during the next stage, which could last for months or even years. The needs as the route, considering the time limits, looking at the needs of the released, and also what's the framework in the international documents, we understood that there is the primary package, urgent needs, from the 1st to the 30th day. Then there is the stage of stabilization, when the person is getting through adaptation from the 1st to the 6 months. The person understands that the life would never change in tomorrow, and nobody will get away this person. Then the person understands how this world is working, and then the long-term rehabilitation and reintegration, mostly on the communities, from half a year to 2 years. We considered diverse international models. We took into consideration them in our proposals. This model was taken into consideration, but it's not just the model, separate models we need to select. Those are the layers which should the comprehensive support for the released from the illegal imprisonment should comprise of. Reparation programs and rehabilitation should be the part of reparation programs. This is the right for the reimbursement of damages as the fullest rehabilitation, which is foreseen by the UN Convention Against Torture. That is also the psychosocial support, and obviously case management. And separately, I'd like to mention that people lack people who after release are trying to identify the fact or to prove to the state officials that they really went through such an experience. They lack the proper documentation of the experience they lived through, the use of the Istanbul Protocol as the standard of documentation of tortures, and so on. The framework program itself, well, you can get acquainted with it, please. The reports are accessible. They are printed out for those who are offline and will be sent out for those who are taking part online. They look like this, and they include lots of information. So my objective now is make you interested, to get you acquainted with this document. So the framework program is offering not as an alternative that we have the law, the resolution, they are not working well, but the framework program is the uniting, combining mechanism, what needs to create a bridge between those fragments of the support which exist in the state now, and they should offer the complementation of what is lacking for our released people according to their words. So the objective is to provide its continuous, people-centered, intersectoral route to transfer the logics of the health provision for the released, which exists now in the state, from the procedural status centers, when the person needs to prove that he or she is a person and that to get something, into the help which is focused for the needs of the released. So the procedures should be taken with the person who has been taken out of the state. So case management and the primary needs assessment, the necessity to create the plan of recovery for each released person, an individual plan of recovery. There should be the route. The person needs to get acquainted with it, agree with it. The person has to take part in its creation. Interinstitutional coordination. The person shouldn't play the role of the coordination center and to run providing certificates and papers from one office to another. We need a one-stop window. We need responsibility on a certain coordinating executive authority, which will provide the interinstitutional coordination between different ministries and institutions, which will share necessary documents on their own without putting this burden onto the person. And obviously, we understand that we cannot satisfy all of the needs, and it cannot be done by the state only. There are specific needs. The state needs to provide the foundation. There are other needs which are rather specific. When NGOs or international organizations are needed, line organizations which know how to provide this or that type of support, and they also need to be part of that. They can work using the donors' money. Maybe the state can be the commissioner of these services from the NGOs. Those are the models which are successfully working, in particular in different countries. So in fact, that's what we could take already now. I need to speed up, right? Then I'd skip some of the slides. As for the one and only route, the person has and would like to have this coordinated route, which would have the entry point, that is the released person, and the first day when he or she came, for instance, to the Ministry of Social Policy, if we define this ministry as a responsible one, came there and got a case manager, got primary assessment, got individual plan, got support in the referring from different ministries and institutions, and got the case manager who could accompany this person as much as it's possible. A month, then a month. If it's needed for 2 years, then this person will do that for 2 years. The case manager himself or herself can be the bridge between all of those special status procedures, diverse institutions, and will provide this support. Among the recommendations, which we formulated for the state authorities. According to our opinion, of course, there should be amendments to the law 3010 about the fact of the illegal imprisonment. There, in this law, we should foresee the right for all of the civilians for the urgent help. And this urgent help shouldn't depend on the status procedures, on the identification of the status and any of the proofs. All of that is needed. All of this proof is obviously needed. The fact should be identified, but it should be during certain timeline, and the person should get some additional help from above. For instance, such a person has the right so that his or her children would get free higher education, or such a person has the right to get higher education paid by the state. All of that is the second level needs. The first needs are rehabilitation needs, so that the person could get to the proper state which he or she had before illegal detainment and torture had taken place. This procedure has to be done really quickly and without any obstacles of the identification of status. We see the necessity in the adoption at the level of the Cabinet of Ministers, the framework program which would describe the procedure of rehabilitation and reintegration and socialization of these people as a separate program. Because as of today, we only have the package of rehabilitation from the National Health Service, which does not take into consideration the experience of these people and the consequences of the torture. So this approach has to be totally different. We see the necessity in the creation. Well, first, the topic of the money. Instantly, there is the question, what money should be used to do all of that? Well, in the ideal world, the state. But this is the huge burden on the state budget now. And as one of the options to solve this issue, as we can see, the opportunity to create the support fund for the victims of the illegal imprisonment and torture. The state institutions could belong to that, as well as the international donors, and they could fund this foundation. There are already precedents. If I'd have time, and if you have interest to speak about that, I can describe that topic as well. Separately, it's really necessary for us to define an authorized unit for the routing and continuity of support for such a person. In our understanding, it could be the Ministry of Social Policy as the provider of such services. We definitely need to provide specific primary package of primary urgent help provision in spite of the fact whether the person has the status or not. The urgency should prevail, not the availability or the lack of the status. And we see the necessity to change the approaches in the work of the Commission on the identification of the fact at the Ministry of the Development. There are lots of unmotivated refusals. The timeline of consideration of statements is too long. So we need to amend the standards in the decision-making process. We need transparent update of the composition of the commissions and training of the Commission members. And then we'll see that it could lead to certain changes. Could you please speed up? Yes, and the last point, obviously, we need to adopt a very specific routing for the rehabilitation packages about the released and international actors, international foundations and donors. I would like also to remind that on the 2nd of October 2024, in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, there was the resolution adopted, which the PACE countries has adopted considering and acknowledging the issue of illegal imprisoned persons and urged to provide expert financial help to Ukraine to launch the program of rehabilitation. We see that such international actors could be also included in the the management and funding of such foundation in Ukraine, which could fund the rehabilitation programs, and they could offer the infrastructure of their own countries, the opportunities of their own countries, so that our people, after the release, could have the opportunity to go abroad, to get through rehabilitation there without missile shelling, without the martial law, and to come back already recovered. Thank you. Thank you, Ihor. While the state is lagging back, I hope that the state would hear your recommendations and would listen to your conclusions. We have the Center of Rehabilitation, which is working ahead of us and is already implementing lots of things which you just listed. That is the Center of Lisova, Polyana. Tetiana, could you please tell more what out of the conclusions of this research resonates in you? What is correlated with the activity of Lisova, Polyana? And what have you already done out of the listed recommendation in your center? And could you give the clicker to Tetiana, please? Good day. My name is Tetiana. I'm the clinical psychologist of the state institution, the Center of Mental Health and Rehabilitation, Lisova, Polyana. I hope that I can get you acquainted with such teamwork of ours, and then you will see that many of the things which you've already mentioned is being implemented. And if such experience would be interested for you, it would be interesting. Could we please talk about the essence as we are short of time? Obviously, let me skip some of the points and move to the following ones. The main attention is paid to the stages of the comprehensive recovery, that is the medical care, first and foremost, different examinations, recovery of the health, legal assistance, social assistance, and mental or psychological assistance, because we are the center of mental health. I would like to mention that we are working in such an approach which has the name of biopsychosocial, which is based on the comprehensive understanding about the or body of the patient. And here we need to take into consideration biological, psychological, and social aspects which cannot be separate from each other. They need to work together. The person cannot feel well if they have numerous unsolved social issues, for instance. The next principles is taking into consideration of the power and sustainability or resilience of the patient. We believe that the person will cope with the appointed tasks which he or she faces, and we shift the accent or the emphasis on the solving of the issues which the person is facing. The principle of a comprehensive approach, which is also a very important one because it allows to satisfy not just one need, but to see them in the integrated approach and to solve them one by one, understanding the importance of each of them. Every expert needs to deal with his or her own sphere. We need to create such a referral link within the multidisciplinary team which is working at our place. What does multidisciplinary team mean? Every expert from different spheres, from different specialties, is working on one case so that we could increase the quality of the services provided. Let me get you acquainted who belongs to our multidisciplinary teams. Those are, first of all, a doctor, a psychiatrist, physical therapist, ergotherapist, occupational therapist, clinical case manager, clinical psychologist, and social worker. So I would like to tell you that such experts, when they are working together, when they can analyze and create the rehabilitation plan, taking into consideration all the individual peculiarities of the patient, then it will be working, obviously, much better, more efficiently. The patient's way, or the route, is rather interesting. If you're interested in that, I can tell about it in more details. When the person is getting to us, first of all, he or she organizes his or her space through the reception and then gets to the doctor, who has to examine the person, to look into the documents the person had, if the person had any, the health state of the person, would appoint therapeutic measures. And besides the doctor, every patient gets through psychological screening, where the expert is also providing his or her own screening, his or her assessment, provides shorter interviews and researches, and also appoints his or her meetings. Later I would tell you what it could include, so that the person could provide psychological comfort and therapy in this sphere. Then, when the patient has been examined by the doctor and the clinical psychologist, he or she is getting to the case manager. The case manager can refer him or her to different measures, because the persons could first it could be hard for them to find the way. That is why we need the case manager, who is a very important person who shows the way to the person. If we take our institution, well, within our institution then. And then the person is getting into therapy and to the social worker if there is necessity, so that have rehabilitation measures at our place, and to satisfy the needs which exist with the social worker. What does our clinical manager do? The case manager. That is a kind of an individual assistant for the patient, who has to show the way, inform and make the patient aware about our institution, what will take place in it, what exactly the person can, beyond our institution, can the person get, the assessment of needs and resources, formation of the individual route of the patient, support and representation of the interests in other institutions. For instance, if the person needs the researchers which we don't have, the case manager can accompany the person so that the person wouldn't stay in long queues, wouldn't search where to go to and how. So if it is done in the organized way, it leads to efficiency, and our patients are really grateful for such an opportunity. The organization of different activities, besides rehabilitation measures are very important, not only to show certain therapy. It is also important so that the person could have the opportunity, my voice is betraying me, so that the person could have the opportunity to switch to other activities, to find something interesting for him or herself, and to find some of the resources, to look into that from different perspectives, and to look at him or herself to find the proper way out. Then the social worker cannot be replaced, because he or she can analyze the life situation of the person, and it could be an individual approach. The recovery, the help in the recovery of the papers, of the documents, which is important as well. Some of the state payments, registration and organization of the medical and legal assistance, procurement of medicines and organization of the examination if it is done beyond our institution, registration of the status, then the assistance in the further treatment or rehabilitation, whatever the patient needs, and if it is necessary, if this is the IDP, the internally displaced person, then the search of accommodation. Obviously, when the person is getting to us and we provide the screening, we make an arrangement, we see and we offer our services. If the person is ready to work further in the individual way, we create a plan and work along it. And if, for instance, the person is ready to work in the group therapy, it is also okay. And then we really respect the person's choice, and we also emphasize on that. Out of the primary measures, those could be psychoeducation, stabilization, and the search of resources, the assistance in some social needs. What exactly is important for us? So that the person could feel some control over his or her own treatment, to be more specific, rehabilitation process, solution of some of the issues or problems. Because the more the person can solve, the more confidence and socialization is getting better. Tetiana, 2 minutes are left for you then. Okay, well, it's hard to stick to the timing. We understand that the huge work has been done. Let's focus on what would be useful to take by the state from your practices for the further changes in the system. Taking this topic, I'd like to delve deeper into this slide for the state. I am not entitled to recommend anything for the state. Let it be done by the legal assistants who are having the right to do that. But summing up our work, I'd like to say that it's so important to have a multidisciplinary approach which is based upon the biopsychosocial model. The involvement of case managers, as that is so important so that the person would be accompanied and supported, so that the person wouldn't be left on his or her own and would understand if it is hard to find a way among the institutions or the documents, then the person could get somewhere, and this should be the one-stop window so that the person would understand where to go to and to be coordinated. That would be a nice idea. What else do we have? Cooperation with the NGOs, which is rather efficient because it expands the opportunities of the state assistance which exists. This could be, for instance, the procurement of certain medicines which cannot be provided by the state programs or researchers, for instance. Well, in fact, that's my idea about that. And obviously the training for the experts who provide services for the people who had experience of illegal imprisonment. Thank you so much, Tetiana, that you shared your experience. We have the representative of one more rehabilitation center. I would ask our technical team to connect us with Azat Azatyan, who is the former political prisoner. Unfortunately, he felt all of the issues of rehabilitation after the comeback from the captivity on his own skin. Now he is the founder of a rehabilitation center in Zaporizhzhia. Azat, good day. Could you please tell what out of the above mentioned is resonating in you and what you are already implementing in Zaporizhzhia in your rehabilitation center? What is working really well, and you think that this experience which you've implemented has to be covered by the state level as well? Good day. Hello to you, and thank you for such the opportunity. Ihor, personally to you, my respect and gratitude that you are protecting us and you are thinking on our ideas and the support which we need from the state. Thank you for that. In fact, all of the above mentioned, whatever was told about, really suits us. But there are some of the points which were not mentioned. This is the rehabilitation of mental health. Why about that? That's so important. Because the person who came back from the captivity can recover some of the functions, But whatever has taken place really impacts on the psychological level. It's a great issue which leads to the problematics which lasts for several years. For instance, I was released 3 years ago, but I'm still feeling PTSD and diverse situations which really influence me as I've been in the captivity. The importance of rehabilitation centers after the person went through rehabilitation, first of all, is really important for this person not to be left on his or her own, as he or she needs to be reintegrated into the society. Secondly, the issue of rehabilitation is not only for the affected themselves, but also their relatives. Because when the person is coming back after the rehabilitation to their family, which was not getting through rehabilitation, and in some time, the person is again coming back to the same state which he or she used to have. And it's important to take that into account so that the persons who would get through rehabilitation programs could do that fully together with their relatives. I have such ideas, and we think it's not only my ideas, but of the whole team which is now working in Zaporizhzhia. So we are working, we have the rehabilitation center, the Way of the Free, Shliach Vilnych. This is the center of mental health for the support of the civilian captured persons and their relatives. We are working not only with the people affected, but with their families, and we try to support them, knowing the problematics from within. As it was mentioned by Ihor before, after the comeback of the civilian prisoner who came back not through the official exchange, but who came back on their own, these people, for those people, it's really hard to find support from the state. It is hard for them to find rehabilitation. And that is why, rather often, we can see divorces in the families, because the person didn't get through rehabilitation. They don't know how to act in the family. They don't know, the family doesn't know how to acknowledge, understand the person, what the person lived through. And it doesn't depend on the gender. It could be the male or the female. So it could be, in fact, CRSV, the rapes. That is also the signal to get rehabilitation not only for the person affected, but the whole family as well, because the person should understand how this person can get support. Thank you so much, Azat, that you shared your experience and your ideas. Yuriy, you've also lived through the captivity. Thankfully, you are with us today already. Could you please share your experience of rehabilitation? Which needs you felt first and foremost? Which needs you still feel? And what are your ideas about the conclusions of this research, whether they resonate in your own experience? Thank you for inviting me, for giving me the opportunity to speak, and thank you for the colossal work you've conducted creating this report. Really, it includes lots of interesting ideas and proposals. I was released just half a year ago. I did not get through my own recovery so far. But what I understood during these half a year, 6 months, I see that the issues of the prisoners exist, and they depend on the circumstances. Some people were released before the full-scale invasion, others after its beginning, others were exchanged during the official exchange, some of them released on their own, some people came back to their homes, some people still have everything left on the occupied areas or have everything destroyed. Some people have come back having relatives, some people don't have anyone left. Some people have stayed in the captivity for a long time, some people were relatively not for a long time there. Some people had the documents, some people don't have any papers. So, in my case, first, for 4 years, I stayed under occupation, which was already the life spoiled. And then for 7 years and 7 months in the captivity, I lost all of the relatives. When I came back here, I don't have any of the relatives left. And besides that, all of the documents were lost. This is the situation. But what can I tell? The assistance from the state, from the NGOs, from the charitable foundations, from my friends and acquaintances, ex-colleagues, was felt since the first days. I cannot say that we were left alone. No, really. We were provided with the first necessity things since the first moments, clothes, smartphones, whatever we would need. And then there was the period of really intense communication. When everything was coinciding, we were all in the state of disadaptation. After so many years, we came back to a new country. Well, I would say in the same country, Ukraine, but which is totally different. It has changed. So, because of this disadaptation, it also coincided with the medical examinations and communication with the security service and the national police. We had to communicate with the representatives of different public institutions. We were visited in the hospital by the high officials like Ms. Vereshchuk, representatives of regional state administrations, and the representatives of all of the social services, pension fund, the employment fund. So somehow we felt a kind of lack of coordination in their work, because their functions were duplicated. Somehow the representatives of both Kyiv city and Kyiv regional administration were coming, and Donetsk administration with the same type questions. But in the end of the day, we coped with that. The primary documents were recovered in a timely manner, but at this stage we really lacked a certain person we could get to with our issues. And these functions somehow were on the doctors of the hospital where we were. This is the surgery department. They are the experts of high-level qualification, but they are the experts of their own sphere. It was irrational. Those were not the people who had to deal with all of those issues. So after such an intense communication period, 3 weeks of examination were over, and then we were let out for the free swimming, so to say. Some of us were registered in the hostel, some of us in the module campus, some of us have moved to the friends or relatives. I was lucky. For 4 months, I was living at my friend's, and now I'm living in the campus of Hansen in Tarasivka. I'm really satisfied with the living conditions. Still, I understand that this is the temporary accommodation, not forever. During these times, all of the primary documents have been recovered, but I have a serious issue with the recovery of documents on my education and labor experience, work experience. I had serious issues with that, especially about the recovery of my diploma of a doctor. I am a doctor by profession. Nothing was working until I coped with this issue, getting the scan copies of the diploma which are preserved on the occupied area. After that, rather quickly, they recovered my diploma. I thought that it's already the great thing to achieve, that now I'm already graduating from the courses and would be able to find job, but I faced another obstacle. I got a refusal to get to the courses and renewal of my doctor's practice because I lacked one more document, the certificate about my internship. And again, I'm facing such an obstacle. I got to diverse organizations, including the Ministry of Healthcare, even the office of Ms. Vereshchuk, but I was told that they cannot help me at all. They are not entitled to interfere into the activity of the Ministry of Healthcare, so I am again in such a lost state. So all of the conclusions which are included into this research are really compliant with our needs. It is necessary to provide some comprehensive system which would have some specific stages, its beginning, and the criteria when it should be over. There should be certain spheres and directions. There should be the one and only standard, but simultaneously everything should be individualized. And it is necessary to have this person of a case manager who could implement all of that into life. So my gratitude goes to you for this work. I hope that it will lead to certain outcomes. And what else I'd like to tell you in the end? I instantly recall the guys who are still in the captivity where I was staying. There are still guys there who are staying there 8 or 10 years even in captivity. Those are the prisoners of Kremlin, and their special law was written for them in the first edition. They were detained because they were doing something for Ukraine, staying in the occupied areas. I'd really hope that when they come back, and I believe that they will, come back from the captivity, that it will be easier for them to overcome all of those obstacles, thanks to your work including. Thank you so much. We also believe in that. As for the recovery of the documents on internship, you have overcome the captivity. I'm sure you will overcome the Ukrainian bureaucracy. Dear friends, dear guests, if you've got any questions, we can really quickly try to conduct a Q&A session as we are out of time. Please raise your hand and you'll get the microphone if you get a question. And do we have any questions online? No, we don't have any online. Any of the offline? I don't see any. Okay, then let me clarify. Ihor, what's the further way for your developments, for your conclusions? There are certain conclusions for different categories, the representatives of the state. What will happen then so that those conclusions and ideas would be implemented in life? I think that it's important to remark that these developments are not something done just by our organization. We just compiled and gathered together lots of information and feedbacks from the released persons, from our colleagues of many NGOs. Many of them are present here, either online or offline. And those are certain fragments which we face, what the state did not foresee, how it should be working. We tried to compile this puzzle out of them, when all of the parts should be compatible. And this is the framework program. This is the high-level view. But in reality, from the state, we'd like to see some proactive behavior so that the executive authorities and our legislator could also include some piece of recommendations. Tetiana has told already today how it is working in Lisova, Polyana. This experience really confirms that what's done looking at the example of one institution is working and that the people are getting treatment there, rehabilitated there, and provide good feedback. It could be upscaled. It could be the standard for the treatment with the people after the release in our country. So it gives us certain practical frameworks. So we are awaiting that the law 2010 will be still providing first and foremost support for all of the released persons, whether the person got through the status identification procedure or did not. And we really hope that the government will define the responsible authority, which will be responsible for the coordination of the whole way, the whole route of the released person since the moment when he or she gets to the territory of Ukraine. As Yuriy mentioned, someone was released by the exchange, as Yuriy was, but still the state has more attention to such persons. But there are people who are releasing on their own, and the state still doesn't know about them, so that the approach, the rights, the opportunities of these people should be equal. So we need to define, to appoint a one-stop shop, the one-stop window, who it will be and who will provide the adoption of such a framework program. And then it will be just the beginning of the way. We'll need to develop standards, routes. There's lots of work ahead of us. Thank you. I hope that you will find allies among the authorities, international partners, NGOs, which are the next ones. And then the following civilian prisoners which will be released will get this one-stop window, and the case management, which we could see according to today's stories, are really needed. Oh, we have the question. Just a moment. You'll get the mic. I would ask you to be really brief, and answers should be brief as well, as we are limited in time. Hello, everyone. My name is Vladlena. I'm the representative of the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Alliance. Thank you for your work. Thank you for sharing your experience, which is really valuable. And I have a question. As one of the speakers said, that in fact, when you get to Ukrainian land after illegal imprisonment, you get lots of attention and too much of attention. Many people come to you. So I have the question. Maybe it is worth not to introduce a case manager instantly, who will be the manager, and other managers will join him or her, and other representatives of the state authorities. But we should provide the basic framework of the needs and would allow the person to take this decision on his own when he or she opens the doors and says, I am ready for communication. And the second question, Ihor mentioned about the upscaling of such centers and such examples like Lisova Polyana is. But if I understand correctly, Lisova Polyana has the limited time of rehabilitation and recovery services for the persons who came back from captivity. So is it worth to refocus it onto the model of the referral of this case to other social managers, maybe within social services, to the local communities or military administrations? Because in the middle of January this year, the procedures were updated. Maybe it should be done in the same way. Did you think about such option? Ihor, the first question goes to you. I guess that Yuriy can tell about case managers. Thank you for the question. You will find when you delve deeper into the report, you will see the proposed logics of yours there. In any case, the case manager, where the person can get to with any question, should be there. But I totally agree with you. We take into account the stage-by-stage approach, that during the first 30 days, the person will get help to get back to the state without pain, when the person understands what is taking place and feels safer space around him or herself. But after, formally speaking, the 30th day, that is the second month, there will be the next stage, the second to the 6th month, when we speak about the social aspect, about the legal assistance, and there we have all of that much more documented according to different procedures. But I totally agree with you that the person himself or herself should take the decision when to delve deeper into this. Yuri thinks that he would like to recover his documents now, and it is needed. He is ready. He feels that he is powerful enough, so he's doing that. But if the person needs time for the recovery, he or she shouldn't have this status-focused obstacles I mentioned above, because it turns out that the person is obliged to do that since the first days. Because just to get any help, they need some kind of status, and that's what we were talking about. It shouldn't be as an obstacle, the status. And then the person will take his or her own decision when to register the documents. Thank you, Yuri. Thank you. I agree with what was mentioned by Ihor. We need to find balance. On the one hand, we'd like to recover the documents as quickly as possible. On the other hand, we need to take into account the state of disadaptation, the lack of adaptation which we are in. In our case, that is really prevailing, because we were in captivity for a very long time. Some people are able to recover much quicker. This stage-by-stage approach, which Ihor mentioned, is so important. Thank you so much, Tetiana. As for Lisova, Polyana, I would only like to add that when the person is leaving our institution in 3 weeks, if we see certain indicators, we can make it longer if there is a necessity. Moreover, we are cooperating with other organizations, and we try to do our best so that if the person is leaving Lisova, Polyana, he or she wouldn't leave to nowhere. So we have such work done. Thank you. The next question will be in English. Could you please put on your headsets? You will hear the interpretation.
Very short. Thank you, Lorenzo Cremonesi, for Italian Daily Corriere della Sera from Milano. Just a question to Yuri. What is the most, according to his experience, of course, what is the most common form of torture?
Well, that is the harsh question. Well, the tortures were used against all of the civilian prisoners who were staying in the illegal detention centers. The tortures were taking place like as beating, so physical force against us. And they really liked our torturers to use torture, electrocuting. They really used it at the broad scale. They used special devices, TAPIC, that is the telephone induction device, and they used even the usual electrocuting 220 watt from the power grid. They put electrodes to different parts of the body, to your hands, to your ears, to your lower limbs, and somehow they also had this pathological passion to genitalia and anal. That is a kind of perversion of theirs. Many of our civilian prisoners had to get through such tortures. Thank you. Well, this is not a note we'd like to end this event with, and I think that all of the presentees will agree. We are wishing that all of those torturers would feel the same, and our civilian and POWs should come back to Ukraine as quickly as possible. We had the presentation of the report about the illegal imprisonment from survival to recovery. If you didn't take the printed out version, take it please, or you can get it online. The Media Center of Ukraine is working on the further schedule. Thank you for staying with us.